Here are the documents.
He
I'm ready
signed
to
the
review
divorce
them.
papers without
Just as
looking
I
at her,
expected.
just to chase a younger woman. And that was the moment he erased his own future. Amara didn't cry, didn't beg. She just walked out carrying a silence heavier than anything he said, and he thought he'd won. Years later, under the blinding lights of a luxury gala, he froze mid-speech as she walked in, elegant, untouchable, and holding a little boy with his exact eyes. His voice cracked, his world tilted, because suddenly every choice he made came rushing back at once. "Is he mine?" he asked, barely breathing, and her answer was about to destroy everything he thought he knew. "You're not enough anymore, Amara," Ethan said without blinking, and the room went cold around her. The skyline outside their penthouse glowed like nothing had changed, but everything inside her did. She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask him to stay, and that silence unsettled him more than any fight ever could. He thought she was weak, easy to replace, already forgotten before the door closed behind her. But what he never saw was how she had been the one holding everything together, quietly fixing deals he nearly lost, catching details his team missed, protecting his empire without ever asking for credit. The moment she stepped out into the night, something shifted in the company he built. Calls went unanswered, contracts stalled, and the machine he trusted began to slow. Months passed, then years, and Ethan grew richer but strangely hollow, surrounded by noise that never felt like loyalty. Then one night, under the sharp lights of a Manhattan gala, he saw her again, and for the first time in years, his breath actually stopped. She didn't look broken, didn't look replaced, she looked untouchable, composed, like she had rebuilt an entire world without him in it. And when a little boy stepped beside her, holding her hand with quiet confidence, Ethan felt something crack deep in his chest. The child turned, just slightly, and in that single glance, Ethan saw his own eyes staring back at him. His fingers tightened around the glass in his hand as realization crept in, slow and unbearable. He stepped forward without thinking, voice low, almost shaking, asking the one question he had no right to ask anymore. And before she could answer, before the truth could fully surface, Amara reached into her bag, pulled something out, and placed it in his hand like a final decision he could never undo. The envelope felt heavier than paper should ever feel. Ethan opened it slowly, his hands no longer steady, and inside was a birth certificate with a name he had never heard before. The date hit him first, then the father's line left blank, and his chest tightened as the truth began closing in. He looked up, but Amara was already stepping away, her posture calm, her pace unshaken, and that distance said more than any words she could have spoken. The room around him kept moving, people laughing, glasses clinking, but his world had gone completely silent. The next morning, his assistant paused before speaking, something she had never done before, and quietly said the last 3 deals collapsed overnight. Investors were pulling back, emails unanswered, and no one could stabilize the situation fast enough. Ethan demanded answers, but every explanation sounded incomplete, like something essential was missing from the system. A senior manager finally admitted it in a low voice, saying Amara used to catch these issues before they even surfaced. Ethan froze, because no one had ever told him that before. He checked old reports, emails, timestamps, and saw her name hidden everywhere, solving problems he never knew existed. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became. The company had not been running on his vision alone. It had been running on her precision, her instincts, her silent corrections. By the end of the week, another contract failed, then another, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt something close to losing control. Meanwhile, across the city, a quiet article surfaced online, highlighting a rising consultant who had just stabilized 3 failing firms in record time. The name was Amara Brooks. Ethan stared at the screen longer than he should have, because everything was starting to connect in ways he was not ready to face. That night, he returned to the gala venue, standing alone where he first saw her again, replaying every second in his mind. If she had built something that strong without him, then how much of his world had actually depended on her all along? And what would happen when everyone else started to realize it before he could fix what he broke? The invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, printed on thick white paper, her name, centered in bold like it finally belonged there. Amara read it once, then set it down beside her laptop, where 3 open contracts waited for her review. Across the table, a senior partner leaned forward and said they needed her decision before noon, not as a favor, but because the entire deal depended on her call. She did not rush. She scanned the numbers, asked 2 sharp questions, and within minutes, the room shifted from tension to relief. One executive actually nodded with respect, something she had never seen before. Word spread quickly after that meeting. Another firm reached out, then another, each one asking for her insight, her timing, her ability to see what others missed. By the end of the month, her calendar filled weeks ahead, and people who once overlooked her were now waiting outside conference rooms just to get 10 minutes of her attention. At a private networking event downtown, someone introduced her not as a former executive wife, but as the strategist who turned around failing companies faster than anyone else in the city. The tone was different. The room listened. Even the older investors leaned in when she spoke, not out of politeness, but because they did not want to miss a single word. Across town, Ethan sat in his office staring at another report that made no sense. Numbers were off again. Timing was wrong again. He heard her name for the 3rd time that week, this time from a board member who casually mentioned hiring her might be the smartest move they could make. Ethan did not respond, but his jaw tightened in a way his assistant noticed immediately. That night, he searched her name again, scrolling through articles, interviews, quiet wins that suddenly felt too consistent to ignore. She was not just doing well. She was becoming necessary. And for the first time, Ethan realized something he could not dismiss anymore. If she could rebuild entire companies without him, then what would happen when she decided to stand directly across from him instead of walking away? The meeting was already in progress when Ethan walked in, late by 3 minutes, something he had never done before, and every seat at the long glass table was taken except one at the far end. He stepped forward, ready to take control, but the moment he looked up, he stopped. Amara was already there. Seated at the head of the table, calm, focused, flipping through a report like she had been running the room long before he arrived. No one announced her. No one needed to. A senior investor leaned toward her and asked if they should proceed with her strategy, not Ethan's. The shift was quiet but undeniable. Ethan pulled out a chair, slower than usual, his movements no longer commanding attention. For the first time, no one turned to him for direction. They were waiting on her. Amara did not look at him right away. She finished her point, closed the folder, and only then lifted her eyes, steady, neutral, as if he was just another person in the room. That pause hit harder than any confrontation. Ethan cleared his throat, tried to speak, but his voice came out tighter than he expected. He asked a question about the numbers, something simple, something he used to dominate. Amara answered without hesitation, precise, direct, leaving no space for him to push further. A few heads nodded. One executive even said, "That is exactly what we needed," and did not look at Ethan when he said it. The imbalance settled deeper. Ethan glanced around the table, searching for someone to align with him, but the room had already moved on. Amara shifted the conversation forward, outlining a solution that addressed problems he had been chasing for weeks. She did not rush. She did not over-explain. She simply knew. That was what unsettled him most. When the meeting ended, people stood, not in a hurry to leave, but waiting for her final word. One by one, they thanked her, asked for follow-ups, respected her space in a way he had never given her before. Ethan remained seated for a second longer than necessary. When he finally stood, he stepped toward her, closing the distance that had grown too wide to ignore. "We need to talk," he said, low, controlled, but no longer certain. Amara picked up her folder, glanced at him briefly, then said, "About what you chose, or what you lost?" The question landed clean, without anger, without hesitation. Ethan had no answer ready, and as she walked past him, someone else approached her with a contract worth more than any deal he had closed that quarter. Ethan turned, watching her move through a world that no longer revolved around him, and for the first time, he felt it clearly. She had not just moved on. She had moved ahead. But as he looked down at the documents she left behind on the table, his eyes caught a detail he had missed before, a clause, a name, a connection that tied her current work directly back to his company in ways he did not understand yet. And suddenly one question rose above everything else. What exactly had she been building while he thought she was gone? The room did not reset after she left, it shifted without him. Emails started coming in marked urgent, but not to Ethan first anymore. Decisions moved faster, but they moved around him, not through him. By noon, a major client requested revisions based on her model, not his. Ethan read the request twice, then a third time, trying to understand when that change happened. His assistant stepped in, voice careful, saying the client had already approved her framework yesterday. He had not been included. Across the hall, two directors stood talking, lowering their voices when he passed, but not fast enough to hide her name. One of them said she solved in hours what they had struggled with for weeks. That line stayed with him longer than it should have. Later that afternoon, a press release dropped online announcing a strategic partnership between three firms she had advised. The headline carried her name, not as support, but as lead architect. Ethan stared at the screen, then at the numbers, and realized those same firms had once depended on his company. Now they were moving without him, guided by her. At the next board meeting, a senior investor opened with a simple statement, saying they should consider bringing her in as a permanent consultant. No one laughed. No one hesitated. A few even agreed out loud. Ethan leaned back, arms crossed, but his usual confidence did not land the same way. When he spoke, his point was acknowledged, then quietly redirected back to her approach. That had never happened before. Not once. After the meeting, he tried to regain ground, calling a key partner directly, but the response came slower than usual. When it did, the partner mentioned they were already in talks with her team. Her team. The phrase felt wrong, but it was real. That night, Ethan reviewed old internal logs, digging deeper than before, and patterns began to form. Critical saves, timing corrections, silent interventions, all tied back to her, all invisible at the time. He sat there longer than he planned, realizing he had not just underestimated her, he had built success on things he never saw. The next morning, a junior analyst approached him, hesitant but honest, saying many of the systems they relied on were originally structured by her before she left. Ethan did not respond right away. He just nodded, slowly, as if something inside him was shifting beyond control. For the first time, it was not about missing her. It was about understanding how much of his world had been shaped by her presence. And as he closed the file, one detail stood out, a reference to a project he had never approved. One that connected her current work directly to a vulnerability inside his company that only someone from the inside could have known. And suddenly the question was no longer about what she built, but what she knew that he never did. The file did not belong to any current project, yet it carried his company's internal structure from years ago. Ethan opened it slowly, his fingers pausing when he saw timestamps that matched his biggest wins. Each success he once claimed now looked different under this lens. The formatting was hers. The logic was hers. The corrections were hers. He scrolled further, and a pattern became impossible to ignore. Every major deal he celebrated had her silent adjustments behind it. Not suggestions. Not support. Actual decisions that changed outcomes before they collapsed. His chest tightened, not from emotion, but from clarity he could not escape. He called in Marcus, his longest-standing operations manager, someone who had seen everything. Marcus stepped in, glanced at the screen, then exhaled slowly like he had been waiting for this moment. He said she used to review everything late at night, fixing risks before they reached Ethan's desk. Ethan frowned, asking why no one told him this before. Marcus did not hesitate. He said because she never let them. She made it look like Ethan solved it himself. The room went quiet after that. Ethan leaned back, the weight shifting from confusion to something heavier. He opened another archive, this one from a crisis 3 years ago, a deal that almost destroyed the company. He remembered staying up all night, pushing through, believing he saved it alone. But the logs told a different story. Her access, her edits, her final call that redirected the entire structure hours before it failed. He stared at the screen longer than he should have. That night had built his reputation. That night had made him untouchable. And now it was clear. It was never just him. The next morning, an investor called personally, something rare, and said they trusted her judgment more than anyone in the market right now. Ethan did not argue. He could not. The truth was stacking too fast. One success after another began to unravel in his mind, each one tied back to her presence. The confidence he carried for years no longer felt solid. It felt borrowed. And as he sat there, piecing it together, one final detail surfaced. A protected file, marked private, opened with her name attached as primary architect on a system he still used daily. A system he believed he created. His hand hovered over the screen, then stilled completely. Because if she built the foundation he still relied on, then everything he stood on was never truly his to begin with. And for the first time, Ethan realized he was not just facing regret. He was about to face her with a truth that could rewrite everything he thought he had built. The room was quieter than usual when she agreed to meet him. No assistants. No interruptions. Just a long table between them and everything left unsaid. Ethan spoke first, faster than he intended, saying he finally understood what she had done, what she had carried, what he had missed. Amara did not react right away. She let the silence sit, then pulled a single file from her bag and placed it in front of him. He opened it slowly. Every page showed decisions he thought were his, now marked with her edits, her timing, her direction. He stopped halfway through. His breath shifted. "This was you," he said, not as a question. Amara nodded once. "It was always me," she replied, calm, steady. The truth did not explode. It settled. Heavy. Final. Ethan leaned back, running a hand through his hair, the weight of years landing all at once. He said he was wrong. He said he did not see her. He said he thought he was building something alone. Amara watched him. Not cold, not angry, just clear. "You were building," she said. "But you were not the only one holding it up." The difference in their voices said everything. He asked why she never told him. She held his gaze and said, "Because I thought you would notice." That was the moment it broke fully. No anger. No raised voice. Just a truth that left no space to hide. Ethan looked down at the file again, then back at her, and for the first time, there was no defense left in him. Only understanding. And it came too late. He asked if there was anything left to fix. Anything at all. Amara stood slowly, smoothing the edge of the folder, her movements calm, controlled, finished. "There is nothing to fix," she said. "There is only what is already done." The words did not cut. They closed. Outside the glass walls, people moved. Decisions continued, her world still turning without pause. Ethan stayed seated, realizing he was no longer part of it. Not emotionally, not structurally, not at all. He had not just lost her presence. He had lost the foundation she once gave him without question. Amara picked up her bag, pausing only for a second, just enough to look at him one last time. There was no anger there. No softness either. Just distance. "I am not the woman you left," she said quietly. "And you are not the man I needed anymore." She turned, walking toward the door without hesitation. Ethan did not follow. He knew he could not. And as the door closed behind her, the silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt permanent. But just before he stood, his eyes caught one last detail on the file she left behind. A final page he had not reached yet, and something about it made his chest tighten again, because it was not about the past. It was about what she had already set in motion next. The final page was not about the past. It was about what came next. Ethan read it slowly, each line shifting something deeper than before. It outlined a transition plan, one already in motion, one that moved key clients, key systems, and key decisions away from his control. Not overnight. Not loudly. Just steadily. By the time he looked up, the silence in the room felt different. Not empty. Just final. Days passed, and the changes became visible. Meetings he once led moved forward without him. Decisions were made before he entered the room. His name still held weight, but it no longer shaped outcomes the way it used to. Across the city, Amara's name carried differently. Not louder, just clearer. People did not question her anymore. They followed her. In a conference room filled with senior partners, she spoke once, and the direction of an entire deal shifted. No hesitation. No second opinions. Just trust. Later that afternoon, she walked out of the building, sunlight hitting the glass behind her, her phone quiet for the first time all day. A small hand reached for hers. She looked down, her expression soft, present, steady in a way that needed no audience. That was her world now. Not built on proving anything. Not tied to anyone who failed to see her. Just real, complete, and fully hers. Across town, Ethan sat alone in his office, the same skyline in front of him, but nothing about it felt the same. He did not reach for his phone. He did not call anyone. For the first time, he let the silence stay. He thought about the nights he believed he was winning, the deals he celebrated, the certainty he carried without question. Now, every memory held a second layer he could not ignore. He was not remembering success. He was seeing what stood behind it, and what he chose to walk away from. There was no anger left, no argument to make, just a quiet understanding that settled in slowly and stayed. Outside, the city kept moving, just like it always had. Inside, something had ended without needing a final word. Amara did not look back. She did not need to. And Ethan finally understood something he could not change. By the time he saw her clearly, she had already built a life where his absence made no difference at all.